Welcome to Theme Booklets, and I'm going to be talking today about a MALP project that we call Theme Booklets or class books. As you are reading a chapter in Perusal about MALP, there is a class book described at the end of the chapter. That is the same project as what I'm calling today Theme Booklets. The one you're reading about is an immigration topic. We're going to look today at 4 theme booklets, and they are all MALP projects and follow the entire model of MALP, but they're all very different. So let's go take a look. But first, we always start where we left off, and where we left off is the MALP model. So if you remember, the MALP model is all about the formal schemata, the hidden agenda of school, and that in everything we do with MALP, we're culturally responsive and sustaining, while at the same time building up the student's ability to do well on standardized tests, do well in the curriculum, and to do well generally in school, to stay and not drop out. Why? Because we're focusing on those decontextualized tasks and academic ways of thinking. And if you keep your eye peeled carefully, you will notice that all the theme booklets, regardless of what kind they are all targeting decontextualized tasks based on academic ways of thinking. That's where we're headed. Okay, so let's take a look. There are 3 types of theme booklets: procedural booklets, curriculum booklets, and language booklets. And these 3 booklets correspond to the 3 schemata. Do you remember the 3 schemata? So procedural booklets correspond to formal schemata. Now remember, we said that all of MALP is formal schemata, which is a hidden agenda of school. But within that, we still have a focus on formal schemata and the other 2 schemata. In this case, the formal schemata for procedural booklets is how to do something specific at school. Procedures, specific things that you learn to do when you're a student at school, not the overall paradigm of education. So there are kind of 2 levels of formal schemata, all right? And now the other one, curriculum booklets, we're going to look at what kind of schema would that be? Content. So content schema, all right? And the third, if it's a language booklet, what's the other schemata type? Is linguistic. So we're going to look at all 3. So if you're building vocabulary or grammar, you're talking about the linguistic schemata. If you're building curriculum knowledge of the various math, science, social studies, ELA curriculum, that's the content schemata. And the formal schemata, which I believe is the most neglected, is going to be in the procedural booklets and in MALP in general. Formal schemata, it's that kicker underneath the language and the content that many of us don't address sufficiently, and that's where MALP comes in. All right, so we're going to take a look now at the first type, which is procedural booklets. That, again, is the formal schemata. And what I'm going to do is so that you can get a really good look at the booklets, I'm going to make it larger so you can follow along. Here we go. So the first one we're going to look at is Renee's class. It's a welcome book, and it was 2nd grade, as you can see, and each student made their own cover for the book. The book was a class project and a class book, but they had individual covers. They made a whole class set, and you'll see why. There's one of the covers, another cover, so you can see. So here's the welcome written by the teacher. I'll give you a minute to take a look. Okay, notice they mention pictures for kids who can't read English yet. Also, notice it's nonfiction how-tos. So this was what Renee did as her second grade nonfiction unit. She got special permission to do that. Also notice that their goal is for every reader of this book to be a super second grader. Okay. And here's the table of contents, how to be a super second grader. And then you can see as you look down the list there that every student contributed a page. And we're going to take a look at a few of the pages. So notice each one is a procedure, a very specific procedure of things that these students do every day. All right, so here's one, the morning meeting, right? We go to the rug, but we do not run with an exclamation point. Sit in a circle and we ask, what's the news? This is important because it's giving the newcomer a phrase to learn in the newcomer booklet. And then this is decontextualized because they're not actually using it at the morning meeting. They're reading about the morning meeting. But when they go to the morning meeting, they'll be ready. They'll have that phrase to plug in a meaningful context. So going from decontextualized to the context where it means something. They have to be able to go back and forth. They read the morning message and take turns to write the morning message. Okay, and the next one I want to show you is the pencil. Notice that these all have the same sequence words, first, next, then, last, with a comma and a period at the end of the sentence. Okay, and of course the pictures. And the last one we'll look at okay, notice under first, you take out your homework planner. It is blue, 2 sentences. A little help there that is blue. Notice at the end it's I show Ms. Finneran. That was my student. So Renee Finneran. There we go. All right. Now, surprise, they had a glossary in their welcome book. So they're really learning the components of the book, table of contents, and then the pages, and then the glossary. And here's their glossary. And the important thing here is not so much vocabulary, and of course they put a picture with it, but the idea that the word glossary describes a section of a nonfiction book. So you can see that's what they're learning, right? And they had this little sign page with the hearts. Okay. Great. All right, and you can see how you could do a MALP checklist for that project. So if you have the MALP checklist and you want to refer to it and think back about how this project has all the elements of MALP, because it does. Now we're going to take a look at a similar project. This one is also a welcome book, but it's high school. And instead of focusing on inside the classroom and procedures for in the classroom, this one is focusing on the building. And when you think about a big urban high school and a student comes there for the first time, maybe recently to the country, this is how they might feel. Not so welcome, right? It's overwhelming, a bit alienating. And so what is their priority? Remember, we're looking for priorities. Priority might be, where's my space? Well, this is their space. They get a locker, and they can lock it, and that's their personal space. So this is very important for them. And then, what's important for us, of course, is the library and literacy. And so there are a couple of pages showing the library and where it is and that you have a slot to return books. This is an older project, so the library is back a little bit in time here, but it's basically still the idea of a library. And, it's something that we can consider valuable, right? So think for a minute about these two projects that I just showed you, and think how it relates to our situation today. Can you think of some booklets, class books that are procedural that you might want to use this coming year? I can. What about online procedures? Take Renee's project and do the online classroom and how to log in, how to go to this site, how to post this, and you could have each student become an expert on one little area, and you could do a class online book about how to be not a super second grader, how to be an online second grader, a super online second grader. And then as far as the high school one, also online spaces, online spaces. Where are the spaces? Where is my personal space? Maybe there's a private journal space where you're only talking to the teacher. So think about how you could adapt this project to online and to our circumstances today. All right. Now, I'm just going to pull this back a little bit because I'm still back here. Hi. Now, we're going to look at curriculum booklets next and look at the content schemata. Can you see this content? What do you think it might be? Probably can guess, right? So this one is social studies, and this is going to be by Carol. You've actually already seen a little something from Carol you'll recognize in a minute. And she was not my student. She was already certified ENL and social studies teacher. And we did some in-district training in her school for MALP, and it was a large high school that had quite a number of SLIFE students, and she was their teacher for both the ENL and the social studies, so she was able to handle both in terms of her projects. And I think if you look carefully here, you'll see the same thing. You'll see all the elements of MALP. Remember what we're looking for, right? We're looking for immediate relevance, interconnectedness, the processes being shared and individual, low stakes, both and back and forth, same with oral transmission and the written word, right? And then we're looking for those decontextualized tasks with academic ways of thinking. Keep that in your mind as we go on an adventure to take a look at Carol's project. Okay, here we go. I'll make it big for you so you can see her project, and I'll see you on the other side again. All right. So, by the way, when they did this, they were looking at slavery to the Civil War to Obama in the White House, this scope, the historical perspective. And her classes, her tasks went from simple to complex. All right, so let's take a look. This is the list of learning activities. Now, what are these when you look at these? Now, a lot of you might say, well, they're graphic organizers, and they are. They're most of them are graphic organizers of some kind. Okay, but in terms of MALP, what are they? They are the decontextualized tasks. And these tasks, these decontextualized tasks that are school-based tasks, but not things that you do outside of school, all of them have an underlying way of academic thinking that Carol is getting at. She's getting them to think in a certain way and using these tasks. So the surface level are the tasks, and then underlying there's an academic way of thinking. And of course, she's using social studies content. So we're going to take a look, and here they are. This is what we're going to be looking through. Okay? Let's take a deep dive. All right, so this is the first one, a T-chart. It's pretty basic. It's got 2 dates. This was done as a class activity, the whole class together. So they all ended up with the same T-chart, right? And she had them looking at material together and talking about it as a class. This was a teacher-guided activity. Okay. Next, they had to select from the T-chart what they were going to include in their film strip. And so they picked visuals. They had a lot of things collected at the time, and they picked the visual that went with the sentence they wanted to put. So there was a combination of the visual and the sentences. These were all different. Everyone did a different one. Okay. Next, you can see the bar graph that you've seen before. So the bar graph I showed you as part of the survey project, which was the first project we looked at, I told you that it was part of a larger unit, and now we're seeing the before and after. So before the bar chart, they did these tallies of what you do in your free time, leisure time, activities for battling boredom. And then they turned those tallies into the bar graph, right? And then they got together to do the next level, which was more difficult, going to the website, this Gettysburg website. She chose it because it had a lot of visuals. This is one page of the site. It had multiple pages. And what they were going to do was look at the site together with a partner and figure out how what they did in their free time and what the soldiers did connected. What was different and what was the same? Well, they'd already brainstormed what they did, and so now they were going to see what the soldiers did. So imagine adolescents of our day connecting with the Civil War soldiers. She was using people as the connection because that's what's important to these students. So they sat together and worked as partners, but each of their Venn diagrams was slightly different. It didn't have to be the same, but they did work in partners. So you can see that this activity was to produce a decontextualized task based on academic thinking, which of course is compare and contrast. And there's a KWL. Now we're moving on past the soldiers to the leader. And the leader we're looking at, of course, was Abraham Lincoln. And so we started with, or Carol started with, what did they know about Abraham Lincoln? Some of them knew separately about Lincoln being on the money. They mentioned it. Several of them mentioned that in their KWL. If you look at the bottom, at the very bottom, it mentions being on a dollar, $20, and there's a number 5 bill. The other material, some of it came from their original T-chart. And what I want you to notice is the second column. Look at the questions. And this was very typical. I have the papers from other students. And they're asking personal questions. Where is born? When is school? How many brothers, sister he had? What state he grew up? Nothing about professional accomplishments. We'll come back to that thought in a minute. We're going to look at another activity later, and I want you to think about that when you get to that. All right, so now we're going to find out about Lincoln. Well, how do they find out? You might figure it's going to be a web quest. So she has them do this. This is a class activity. They could walk around the lab, help each other, and they were all filling in the same information. Carol had bookmarked particular sites where they could go and investigate Lincoln. And I know this isn't that clear, but it was because the opposite page, they were back to back, and it was bleeding through, so I had to get it so you could at least partially read what was on the page. And here's the other page. And as I said, this was a new activity, a web quest, so it was scaffolded, heavily scaffolded, by her selecting several sites and by the whole class helping each other and working together. And again, put a pin in that, because if you remember from the original list, there's another web quest, and we'll see how she scaffolded for them. Okay. Now, this is the other T-chart. So in this T-chart, now that they're familiar with doing the T-chart from the whole class activity, they now individually have to take the information they learned from Lincoln, about Lincoln, from their web quest, and place it in the correct column. So do you see what they're getting at here? What is she trying to teach them here? This is more difficult than just putting a bunch of facts down on a T-chart. Remember, the original was 1860 facts, 2008 facts, all right? Now we're doing something more conceptual. It's not about what are the facts, it's about what kind of facts are they. So relevant and irrelevant, what do you think she's looking at here? Take a minute and look at the difference. Remember when I mentioned in the KWL, the students were asking personal questions they wanted to know about Lincoln? So what Carol is trying to do is help them distinguish, for a great leader, what are the professional facts and what are the personal facts. So she's teaching them this categorization task with all the facts they have, and she's helping them to separate them conceptually, professional and personal. And this is really important because a lot of slaves don't differentiate and they don't compartmentalize their lives. Okay? If they know something or they know someone, it's all as one. And you remember, maybe you remember the example of my student who just wanted to know how many children I had, not my degrees. You know, they tend to go more to the personal, and she wants to help them realize, okay, Lincoln did all these amazing things. You want to know about his personal life? Sure, we'll look at that too. But it's not relevant to learning about him as a leader. So do you see how she's really teaching them about the hidden agenda of school? They're going to do better on standardized tests because they had Carol as their teacher who used MELP. Now, the culmination and most exciting part of this project is about to come. This is the last one I'll show you. Another web quest. Remember the other web quest they did as a group, and it was Lincoln, and the sites were selected. Now, every student had to find a great hero or heroine from their country, somebody that they could find out about. And here is a student who was from Guatemala, and he did research on a Quiche hero. That's an indigenous group of Mayans in Guatemala. And the name of the hero was Tecum Oman from the 1500s. And this is the only student who did that web quest, and then later gave a presentation and knew about this person that he had never known about before. And so here's the culturally sustaining piece, not just responsive, but sustaining. This is not part of our regular curriculum, but we want the students to feel empowered and to take ownership, and this is the way to do it. And so you can see here that this was a wonderful opportunity for this student to become an expert on somebody from his own background. And here is the picture of it. It's a statue, of course, and the students working in the computer lab doing their project. Okay, and I am going to show you the actual binder. So this project was a binder, not a booklet exactly. Let me just show you. I'm going to stand up to show you this. All right. So we have the actual binder here, and I just want you to see Carol kept this. So here is the original T-chart, and then there's a bunch of them from different students. Okay, and then we have the film strip, and for that you can see they open it up and the fact is inside. I showed it as 2 pages, but it opens up, and back behind it is the fact. So that's really good for understanding, you know, the visual to support the written word. And then we keep going through the booklet, and we come to the next one, which is the Venn diagram, as you see right here. There it is. They have different ones, the different partners came up with different ones, a bunch of those. And the next one is that famous bar graph that now you've seen a few times. And these are the other students that did their bar graphs. They all looked a little different. All right, enough of that. And then the KWL. Here it is. There's one of them. And then a batch of those, different KWLs. Then we come to the relevant, irrelevant T-chart and the WebQuest, WebQuest. Remember, they did two. I'm showing you the second one. Okay, so you can see this was a MALP project. It was done in 2009, by the way. So when they were studying 2008, they were doing contemporary, the contemporary world, not historic. It wasn't like today's 2020 and they were studying 2008. It's 2009. Okay. Now, we're going to go on to the third type. Last, here we go. The last one I want to show you is a language booklet which deals with the linguistic schemata. So can you tell what they're going to do in here? What is it going to be? You can see it right away, right? And those look like slides, don't they? Actually, they are slides. And this is another type. So we had a booklet, we had a binder, and now we're going to have an electronic theme booklet, which is going to be PowerPoint slides. And it's going to be linguistic. I wanted to show you a variety. So let's get it big now so you'll be able to appreciate the slides. And this one's a lot of fun. Get ready. There's a reason I'm showing it to you last. It's fun. Okay, so let's go. Ready? Woo! So this is not his real name. He had a lot of fun with this. You can see Dominicano, 100%. All right. And notice that you have the pronoun. It is about pronouns. And there's an arrow pointing to the person, he. Okay. So let's go and see what else he did. So the next one is a feeling. And we might think maybe he's really expressing a feeling here, right? Angry. Okay. And then the next one, they are a group. So notice the people. It must be some people that he found that he connected with in some way. And there's an arrow pointing again, and the pronoun. All right. The next one, maybe this is someone who likes to dance. You don't know, but he chose that word, dancer. And we've got the she and the arrow. Right, and the next one, I am, as if the gentleman is speaking. Maybe that's someone important that he recognized or looked like someone he knew. And the next one. Now, what you'll notice here right away is that everything isn't perfect. This is a student. The student is learning about pronouns. So he is Dominicano, she. But in any case, it could be that he was talking about himself here and then put she here. So we can't get inside his head, but that's a cutie, right? Okay, and next. Okay, this I'm told was the shoe they had to have in his peer group, so he made sure he used that shoe. So you see how, again, this is meaningful to the student, it's culturally sustaining, but it's doing pronouns. Isn't that better than a worksheet? Leave worksheets behind. And this student now can show this to peers. It can be peer instruction, right? And of course, and this is really great because literacy is, again, our priority. And Junot Diaz is a wonderful author. And if they can connect with him and his work, that is what we want, right? And then he ends with a little nod to U.S. culture with Stephen Colbert. Now, can you imagine doing the MALP checklist for this project, right? It's all MALP. If you can think about the way this is so constructed as to be culturally responsive and sustaining, and at the same time work on technology, work on literacy, work on interconnectedness and immediate relevance for the student. Okay, so now I'm going to come back. All right, so what did you think of our booklets? Okay, I just want to recap. And by the way, you remember the 3 types of booklets? Do a retrieval practice. That really helps. Try to remember the 3 types of booklets and the schemata that went with each one. Remember? Procedural with formal, curriculum for content, language for linguistic. And I just want to add that that last one was also Renee, because she was my student. And when you get certified, it's K through 12. And so we placed her also in a high school. So she was the one who worked with the pronoun electronic PowerPoint booklet. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed this. I just want to show you, this is my other book, Making the Transition to Classroom Success, Culturally Responsive Teaching for Struggling Language Learners. And in here, we have the theme booklets section. And we go in great detail on theme booklets in this book with a lot of other projects as well. We have a chapter on the flipped classroom and some other things that might interest you. Okay, thank you.